Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Brandon Cobb, and today I've got Bill Douglas with OpticWise on the call. I'm excited, guys. This is a unique guest that's doing something in the commercial real estate world that, quite frankly, I didn't know existed, but in a world that is becoming more and more digital, where data is king and owning your data can mean the difference between staying in business and not staying in business. This guy has an amazing solution. So he's going to talk a little bit more about how his business is helping commercial real estate operators gain back control of their data and how to monetize it and squeeze out more money. Because we know whenever you can squeeze out more money, that NOI goes up and the values go up. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brandon. It's a pleasure to be here, and I
Yeah,
appreciate that stellar introduction.
yeah, I loved your story before this call, especially like the health stuff, and you've got like a really unique story. You struggle with MS for a little bit, 10 years on medications, and then you were able to just change your lifestyle and your diet and start exercising, and voila, it cured it. And you were speaking at an event, and you had one of the largest REIT owners or managers come up to you and be like, you need to write a book on the whole thing you just explained to us, that's digital. So you got a pretty unique story. Before we kind of get into some of the digital asset stuff, for those that don't know who you are, what is your story and how did you get into the space?
I've been a lifetime entrepreneur. This is my seventh venture for companies, and my last one finished in 2015. And I consult with entrepreneurs in between businesses. So I sold out in 2015, and I knew Drew Hall. He's the founder of OpticWise, and I started consulting with him. And a very compressed story. 3 months later, I gave him the deliverable to go to market, and he said, I'm a technology guy. I can't run this. Do you want to do it? And I had already fallen in love with the business. They were doing managed Wi-Fi and connectivity in student housing, and my plan was to get out of student housing and go into replicable portfolios of commercial real estate and multifamily and office and hospitality. So we did that, and that was 11 years ago that I joined, and it's been a fun run. And we actually grew the most through the pandemic. It was a challenging time, but we did a lot of customer acquisition then, and it was a really great time to implement new strategies and new digital and technology implementations because buildings were empty and there was a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines. So we didn't have to
Mm.
disrupt tenants for a lot of that. So, and our multifamily assets grew tremendously because people wanted to work from home and wanted to do that securely with all the mobility to work anywhere from campus, not just in their apartment. So we have some great success stories, but it just continued to evolve. And as AI got more and more prevalent, we have been using machine learning for quite a while. As AI got more and more prevalent, I started to speak more to the point. And I was at that trade show on a panel, and I said, why does this industry give away their digital infrastructure? And why does it give away their data? Why don't they leverage it? Why isn't like technology considered an asset, just like sticks and bricks and windows and facades and the carpet that you put in the lobby and all of the landscaping you do outside to get people to come in? Why do you just brush off technology the last 90 days before something goes live? Or why is it the last thing you look at when you do diligence to buy the property? And then that's when Fred walked up and said, you should write a book about that. So fast forward a year, there was a book. We published Peak Property Performance last June. Fast Company Press published it. We didn't, but it was an honor that they said yes.
Very cool. It's not every day that you get to be an author of a published book, especially in something so niche. So peak property performance.
Mm-hmm.
Explain to me, as if I'm a third grader, exactly what it is you guys do with data, because it's very unique. And you're right, most people, they don't underwrite like the data when they're buying something, or they don't think like, how can I use the data to help increase
Mm-hmm.
the net operating income on a property? But it's real, that data is arguably what won like the 2016 election, because I think Trump, he was using some stuff with Cambridge Analytica and crunching data on who and what and putting ads in front of them. And so, like, data is king. It's why the largest companies in the world right now, the most valuable, like their whole company is built on data. But it seems like the smaller guys haven't figured out a way on how to really use that yet.
Well, we advocate you start by looking at your digital infrastructure. By digital infrastructure, we mean the networks, the devices, the sensors. and even the systems you may either rent as a SaaS platform or own. Think of your building and the data it's generating. So, for the purposes of our conversation, we're not talking about data about your tenants. That's off limits. We're talking about data that your building is generating and that you actually own. I challenge you to figure out, do I have access to it? Since I own it, can I use it? Imagine what you could do if instead of 10 to 15 systems in a building, all operating separately with different data silos, imagine what you could do if you could look between all 15 systems, apply AI and machine learning. Whether you did it or another vendor did it, that data is extremely valuable. But right now, it's just sitting in silos. And there are 10 to 12 networks and all these, average 10 or 12 networks in a building where there only needs to be one or two. Think about the costs and the capex to put those in. Think about the opex to operate those. How much money is leaking through the cracks in the floor when we do a digital audit? And in the book, we give away how we do it. You can do it yourself. Like, it's peak property performance, and there's a DDIA form. It's a data and digital infrastructure audit. So you don't have to hire us to do it. We're a managed services firm. We do any phase of this all the way through the connect and the collect, but there's a 5-step process. It's tedious, but it's not hard. So you can grab a hold of your digital assets, grab a hold of your data, and within 2 years, you will probably have 3 to 5% more NOI simply from OPEX reductions, insurance, utilities, and then you can think about how many more new revenue sources could I get if I was leveraging my digital infrastructure.
So 35%, I mean, that's a big deal. Every dollar
Yeah.
counts, especially when there's multiples on that NOI and the cap rate. So where's that 35% coming from? Kind of reverse engineer it. How do those dollars appear, and what are some of the digital data? I don't even know what to call them, but like sources that like we should be tracking that we're not currently tracking.
Well, in a building with a lot of common areas, utility is a major impact.
Mm-hmm.
Utilities, plural. So utilities reductions are on average 3%. We see them go as high as 6. Insurance reductions. Your underwriter will be very impressed if you could show him or her a data lake with all of your operating data in it. How many alarms did I have for water? How many tenant complaints did I have for this? How many times did I have to service that chiller on the roof, et cetera, et cetera. When you have an SOP to go with it, a standard operating procedure, and a data lake and an operating history, you will see lower insurance rates. Even if they don't lower your current rate, your next bump is not going to be double digits. It's going to be 1 or 2. You will see a significant reduction in insurance. So utilities, insurance, and occupancy are the big 3 we always attack first. By occupancy, a digital infrastructure should provide a much better tenant experience. So if you market it right, not just the connectivity, that's a big part of it, but if you market it right and all the features that your building has because you have control of the data and the digital infrastructure, market the privacy, market the mobility, market all of that as a tenant feature, nothing extra is charged for it, occupancy goes up. You might be able to actually not raise your rent next year and make more money and drive your occupancy up. We see all kinds of choices by owners. Some owners want to just charge the max all the time. Some owners actually want to hold the rent still because they're made 3 to 5% more, and then they'll see a couple percent bump in their occupancy. So you have
So
a lot more tools in
utilities
your
in
disposal.
yeah, utilities, insurance, and occupancy. You said those are the 3 biggest you first tackle, and then you mentioned occupancy. So how are you utilizing data to get more butts in rooms?
I'm not talking about your property management, your lease management system, and all the data from the plethora of companies that are telling you what to charge and where to get it. I'm talking about what could you provide to the tenant that would draw them in more? What connected, private, secure, mobile experience would enhance your building versus the one across the street or down the block? Like, if you could show them that they could work, if it's an apartment building or even if it's an office building, they could work from anywhere on campus and still be on their own network. They don't have to sit in their space. It might blow their mind. You could go sit in the coffee shop on the first floor or the nice rooftop deck on the X floor, 5, 10,
Mm.
15, whatever, and still be on your network. You don't have to sit in your space. So if you have an office building and you have a tenant who's going to rent one floor and you say to them, your corporate network works all over this building, whether it's
Hmm.
the when your employees go to the lobby and for the cafeteria, or they go to have a burger, at the golf simulator, they're still on your network. When they go to the lawyer on the ninth floor, because you use them, they're still on your network. They don't have to VPN in from somewhere. That becomes hugely valuable. And the same thing works in an apartment building. If I'm still on my network. So
So that's occupancy. What about utility? So you mentioned in insurance using data. So if you can send your insurance company all the fire alarms that you got,
yeah,
the data on how many instances something happened, you're going to get the best possible rate on insurance, which is one of the big costs. So that's one way of lowering the insurance down. Well, what about utilities? Like how does using digital infrastructure help you get your utility bill down?
if you have a building with a sizable common area, more like in an apartment building, shared space. So maybe it's not going to work as well in cottage style walk ups, right? But if you think about more dense apartment buildings or an office building where there is a load, whether it's shared in cams or triple net or not, there's a shared load. You have peak utilities, like demand charges by all the utility companies. Why would you start your large motors during those times? Why wouldn't you feather them a little bit then and start them in off peak times? Why are the lights on all night? They don't need to be. Just because they were turned off, but then the cleaning crews came through and turned them all on. Why are they still on at 6 in the morning? Like, there are things that you can do, just low hanging fruit, by having the data, like by knowing what the rates are going to be. If I use this, then what's the load to start that motor? Why a lighting load? Your lighting control system. Sometimes we do audits, digital infrastructure audits, and we find lighting control systems that aren't even on, let alone optimized. Like one building last year, we found a $75,000 improvement in OPEX simply by turning on a lighting control system and optimizing it. It had never been turned on in the 7 years since the building was built. It was capitalized and paid for and never turned on. The building had traded hands, and then the property manager had traded hands. There was no documentation for it. So they hired us to come in and help them figure out what their digital infrastructure is. And our eyeballs were like, why is that not on? Is that
It's like the
is their
plumber that
utility
comes into
bills
the
were
house to fix the sink. It's like my sink's clogged. He came in one time to me and he just pressed the button and it just popped up. He's like, "This is a little push sink," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" Like that's all you got to do. It's like, yeah, that'll be $200, but you don't have
right,
a plumbing problem.
right. You don't have a plumbing problem. It didn't overflow the sink. So things like that, knowing what tools in your arsenal. So you don't have to look at this as an immediate fix. It's a slow strategic process to get control of your digital infrastructure and your data. Because even if you did it as fast as 6 months and started collecting data, you have to have a set of data before any machine learning can start to run on the data lake or the data set, whatever it is. You need a substantial set of, say, 6 months worth of operating data. But the
Mhm.
deeper you go, the better it is operationally. But we are seeing buyers pay more for the data lake itself when they
For the what
transact with us,
itself?
for the data lake itself. We are
Oh
seeing,
yeah, you're new. So when you go to sell the asset, like, hey, look, I've got my data on everything that's going to
mm,
help reduce the risk of your purchase.
yes. So we're seeing that easily buyers pay 6 digits for that. We've seen some go for $250,000. And I'm not talking about NOI flow through your cap rate. I'm talking about in addition to, because it minimizes their risk. You nailed it. They know exactly what they're buying. You give them some time in the data room to deal with that data lake, to run their own, analytics on it. And then they can see, okay, we like this.
Why would they pay for it though? Like, wouldn't they just request that from the seller as part of the deal?
Well, the sellers are astute. They're making that an adder.
Oh, really? They're saying, well,
Yeah.
if you want the data, we'll sell it to you. It's our data because if you don't buy it, you still got the data.
Honestly, a lot of times they're not asked for the data. They do all the diligence and provide it. And then they'll say, oh, would you like this? Because I'll sell you this too. They'll make it another
Hmm.
asset. In 5 years, I would expect that it becomes standard. Like we are seeing the financial institutions start to do more diligence on the
Yeah,
digital
they're
side.
they're gonna eat that up. Like they live
Yeah.
and breathe and eat crunching numbers like that. Huh.
Yep.
Well,
They
that's
really
good for
are.
you guys. So, what are some other things besides the big three? Utilities, you mentioned occupancy, and you mentioned insurance. Like, what are some of the others?
Uh, you can get into ancillary revenue. Like we see people using space utilization. Like maybe they have a gym and we're seeing people give it away or donate it, right? To Silver Sneakers, for instance, during times where it's not being used. And they get a tax deduction for a donation. We are seeing people change the parking rates by looking at the venues around them, the baseball stadium, event venue like concerts. Why is the parking $6 when the venue is charging $25? So we're seeing thousands of dollars roll through just by dynamic parking
Hmm.
rates. So what other things could you do? Those are two low hanging fruit, but what other things could you do to capture more revenue on the top line, not just reduce expenses? Both of them impact NOI.
Yeah,
But if you don't have the option to look at it, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
very interesting. So, how do you guys help people, commercial real estate operators, get a hold of their data? I'm trying to think of this right now because you mentioned a lot of people don't have control of it. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the occupancy data, for example, I guess let's use this in like the big three. You mentioned utilities, you mentioned insurance, and you mentioned occupancies. Like, so how do you guys help them get control of their data? And like, what would be an example of where the data's there, but they don't have control of it and they're just giving it away to a third party?
Well, most of the time when you sign up for a prop tech or commercial real estate tech, it's a SaaS platform, software as a service. And in the
Mhm.
contract, it usually says it is your data, but it is sitting inside of the vendor system. For you to see this data, you have to log into that system, look at a dashboard. You don't have access to the raw data because you haven't connected to that system and collected your own data. So those are the two, like you clarify what you own and don't own, what your digital architecture is in your data map. Then you have to connect to these systems and collect the data. Then you can start to coordinate between all these systems. But if you leave it to your vendors or integrate your vendors, that's two vendors talking. And it's their platform. It's really not you using your own data. And then you're getting more and more reliant on the vendor itself. Some vendors are deciding to charge their clients for their own data. We have a big problem with that, just like we have a big problem with the ones that use your tenants to monetize their own services. ISPs are really good at that, right? If it's free, it's because you're the product, just like Gmail.
Yeah.
So we take offense to privacy and we take offense to the fact that you own this building, you own the data it's generating. Why don't you have access to it? If that vendor doesn't want to give it to you, you probably should have a very frank conversation with them. Right? If you want the data, you can get it. Whether they want to give it to you or not, we can get it. But it's your data and you can get it. So
So like
getting
on
it
the on
before you could use it, you have to have it.
yeah. So for the utilities, for example, like I get a monthly utility bill, right? And
Yeah.
commercial properties do the same. So, I mean, is that an example of them giving me my data, or is there more to it than that?
Some of the utilities are very forward and you can get almost real time on some of the larger buildings. And some of them, even if it's just monthly, you can get all of your peak and show the map of all the usage. I'm a power guy. I like this part. So that was a layup. But rather than look at the bill and say, I paid this much, how do I reduce it? You could actually look at the demand curve and see what parts hit peak and how do I start to reduce? How do I shave the high numbers? So I would take the utility bill and then turn around and look at how am I controlling my large motors, and HVAC is full of large motors. Elevators are full of large motors. Like you probably can't shave the elevators, but maybe you could take one of them offline and rather than let two run. We do see things like that all the time. I don't know. It depends on the building. What are the large motors are there? Because those demands, they charge you that demand fee is 2 to 3x normal. So you can shave a significant number off the utilities just by managing the demand curve. Like
Interesting.
gas is pretty static. It's not going to be demand. You do still want to know it. Water, we see a lot of, in office buildings, we see a lot of owners start to sub-meter watering because they traditionally they would just split the cam charges. Our water bill is, I don't know, $100,000 a year, and this space is 10%, that space is 8%. That's, we just apply it accordingly. But in reality, that space is the 24/7 call center. That space is doing clean manufacturing, right? That space is doing something else. And this place is a dentist, and the dentist is open 30 hours a week. So if we sub-meter it, we can charge them what they actually use. So
Very
that,
cool. So like, what does the process look like to start getting a hold of this? Like when you work with clients, I mean, how do you help aggregate all this? Because it sounds like it's a lot of work to go in and like you got to think like you mentioned the insurance, the number of fire alarms and extinguishers and stuff like that. It sounds like there's a lot of manual work that has to be done, not just to get the data, but to keep the data updated.
well, leak detection is another one that drives insurance. Like, what are your leak sensors and what is the operating procedure when one of those alarms goes off? If you don't have leak sensors, they're straightforward to put in. Yes, there is an expense, but the payoff is usually really short. So if you don't have it, you can look at doing that next time you do have some capital or financing that. Right. But the first thing you need to do is figure out what you have in your digital infrastructure and what data you want, because that's going to impact what the next play is. We call them, the book is full of sports analogies. So we talk about plays. You don't want to go for a home run the first time. You want to do something you can get done in the first quarter that your team will see progress. Right. So we will advise you on what works and what doesn't. So maybe the first play isn't the biggest dollar impact. Maybe it's the lowest capex. Maybe it's the lowest impact on my own team time wise.
Mhm.
Maybe it's the shortest one, and I just want to claim the quick win. There's a lot of choices that work, but you, we're not going to come in and say you should do all of these at once. Very most often, we don't advocate doing all of these, all systems. Some of them are just not worth it. There's to connect and collect the data wouldn't move the needle. Like there are some of them that don't matter, but those are the anomalies. Most of the time they matter. And you could build a 2 or 3 year roadmap to connect to these and start collecting the data and use the savings to finance the next step.
Are you guys using AI in any of this to like crunch the data and make recommendations?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Machine learning is a big part of what we do when we have the operational data, but we use AI all the time. When we do a digital infrastructure review with somebody, we're already going to use AI against, national standards and all of the data we have about buildings of your size, of your market, and your type. This is what you should expect. Yes, absolutely. We live off
Interesting.
of data. Where like all the data in the book is real, and we made up 2 characters to tell the stories because the people who gave us permission to use their data, good, bad, or otherwise, not all the stories in there are good. There's a lot of stories about
Yeah.
what not to do. They said you can use it, just don't name the property of the company. So Fast Company Press made us validate all the data, but the 2 characters that happen to work for OpticWise are fictional, but the rest of the data is real. So you can see some case studies in there. You could see what you should expect if you do this.
Mhm.
Maybe you don't have the right kind of property to do. Sometimes these old rooftop units, for instance, they're not big enough to move the needle electrically, and they're on old thermostats. So why start with that project, right? We'll find another one. Maybe the parking is easier to generate some NOI. Maybe some
Yeah.
other space utilization projects are, and then use that money to go redo the thermostats and control those rooftop units in a way that saves you electricity.
Wow.
So
Well, where are you
you have to think
seeing
about it
the
strategically. It's not a one size fits all.
no, I know it's not. Where are you seeing like the lowest hanging fruit for um, lowering expenses in general? Because I was on the phone with an apartment complex and it was all AI and like I couldn't tell that it wasn't like a human being. And I'm like, wow, like you don't have to have somebody answering the phone now. Like that is wild to me.
That is wild. But honestly, when we get done with a digital review, or anybody gets done with it, they will find multiple networks not needed that they're paying to operate They're paying for
Mm.
multiple internet connections. They're paying for multiple network connections. They're renting devices that aren't even being used because they were on some contract. If they're not being used, turn it off, pay to get out, like reduce your burn. So just figuring out digitally what your assets are will reduce your OPEX. That is honestly the first and finest low hanging fruit. No AI required. It's just a matter of looking at technology as an asset, just like you would anything else in your building, right? You track the elevators, you track an escalator, you track an air conditioner, you track the water heater, you track all of that. But why don't you track the technology?
Yeah. This has been a fascinating conversation. Bill, if people want to learn more about Optic Wise, learn more about you and learn more about how they can use data to help increase their NOI, lowering expenses. Cause I mean, this is the future. You'd even mentioned, institutions needing, probably wanting to do this, and this will be like mandatory over the next 5 years for people that want to buy these large apartment complexes. They're going to want the data. So, I mean, it definitely seems like this is the future. Where can people go to learn more about this?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm actually slash Bill Douglas, but it'll say resilience guy in the middle. I'm resilience guy Bill from the story you told. Or hit opticwise.com, spelled OPTICWISE.com, and fill out an inquiry. We do complimentary review sessions just to help people. A lot of what we do is not billable. We spend a lot of time, just like on the book and our own podcast, talking about how to change this industry with thought leadership. So we don't expect to bill everything. We don't bill by the hour. We try and help everybody we can.
I love it, man. Go check that out. Appreciate you coming on the show. And if you guys have gotten value from this, share this with somebody that needs to hear it. If you've got somebody in the commercial real estate space that is maybe struggling right now, like I know a lot of have, and every dollar counts, like share this episode with them. And we'll see you guys next time. Bill, thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.